Chapter 7 centers on social development. The areas of concern of social development include 1. Improving access to adequate and quality social services in terms of health, nutrition, and population, education, training and culture, and housing. 2. Protecting the poor and the vulnerable, which tackles social protection. And 3. Accelerating the implementation of asset reforms, which include agrarian, ancestral domain, and urban asset reforms. The major cross-cutting social development strategies are the following. 1. Attaining the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, by 2015 through accelerated programs and affirmative action in education, health, nutrition, gender and development, housing, and social protection interventions. 2. Closing the universal coverage gaps through the universal healthcare. 3. Converging social protection programs to priority beneficiaries and target areas with the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program, or 4Ps, as core program. 5. Accelerating asset reforms in the agrarian, ancestral domain, and urban sector. Mainstreaming climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction in social development interventions. Strengthening civil society basic sector participation and public-private partnerships, or PPP, and volunteerism to provide better access to social services. The targets for health, nutrition, and population according to the major indicators are shown. Consistent with the MDGs, infant mortality rate is targeted to decline to 19 per 1,000 live births by 2015. Maternal mortality ratio is targeted to sharply drop to 52 deaths per 100,000 live births by 2015. In basic education, guided by the MDGs, net enrollment ratio is targeted to become universal, or 100%, by 2016. This should be coupled with increased cohort survival and completion rates to reach 86.4% and 82.5% respectively by 2015. For technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, gender equality in terms of enrollment and number of graduates is targeted to be achieved in 2015. Certification rate is targeted to be maintained at 83.3%. In higher education, enrollment is targeted to increase at an average annual growth rate of 1% from 2011 to 2016. National passing percentages in licensure examinations need to be increased to 52.5%. For housing, the annual target for housing delivery is 370,000 housing units to reduce the housing backlog estimated at 195,133 annually. For agrarian asset reform, the total number of hectares to be distributed is expected to reach 1.2 million hectares, benefiting 1.2 million farmers and their families. The priority legislative reforms in health, nutrition, and population are the amendment of Republic Act 7875, or the National Health Insurance Act of 1995, the enactment of the Reproductive Health and Population Development Bill, the amendment of Republic Act 8504, or the AIDS Prevention and Control Act, the adoption of national policy on managing human resources for health, and the restructuring the excise tax on alcohol and tobacco products and earmarking portions to fund vital health programs. For education, training, and culture, we shall pursue, among others, the Act establishing a multilingual education and literacy policy, the Act strengthening and expanding the education service contracting scheme for basic education, the Enterprise-Based Education and Training Act, and the enactment of Region 11 Regional State University System to be implemented nationwide. For housing, we prioritize the creation of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or DHUD, requiring developers of proposed condominium projects to develop an area for socialized housing as compliance to the 20% balanced housing requirement, and the establishment of local housing boards in every city and municipality. For the social protection, our legislative agenda include the Magna Carta for workers in the informal economy and the Magna Carta of the Poor, which seeks to provide basic rights of the poorest of the poor to food, employment, healthcare, and social welfare services. For asset reform, the most crucial is the passage of the National Land Use Act, or NALUA, which seeks to rationalize land uses among agricultural, infrastructure, housing, and protected areas.